Good morning. We begin with the man responsible for day-to-day running of the city of Dallas. City Manager T.C. Broadnax is our guest this morning, and we have lots of questions for him, so let's get right to it. And joining the questioning this week, Bud Kennedy is also Shelley Koffler, a Channel 8 alum, a friend of ours.
Poor substitute, but glad to be here.
Glad to have you in. She is joining the questioning as well. T.C., good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's been a while since you've been in. Let's start with the police department and response times specifically. They have gone up year to year. It takes longer for officers to show up when someone calls 911. What's the message to citizens?
One is that continue to call and we will continue to come. We're working through some of our attrition issues, but the chief and her team are trying to figure out daily, actually, trying to figure out how we get more people in vehicles to get out and respond to you. And I'd say if in fact you do not need a police officer, find the alternative number to call and we'll find some way to help you out. We have a lot of people calling 911 in some cases that may not actually need a 911 response. And so we're trying to better educate, trying to work with the community, but also trying to make sure that we can be as responsive as we can with the staffing that we have.
Getting more badges in cars is also something you're talking about, something the chief is talking about too. Getting more police officers out in cars, but aren't you taking away, or isn't she taking away from the detective roles where they could be investigating other crimes? Isn't there a cost benefit here on this?
Well, there is, but I don't think she's specifically doing that, particularly at a point where it's going to somehow reduce the level of service that we're having in our detective ranks. We're obviously trying to get more people out on the street and taking them from behind desks and putting them in situations where they can respond to calls. But she's balancing that, and obviously given the challenges with some of the officers leaving as well as some of our efforts in recruitment, that we've got to find all ways to try to address that. But she's doing the best she can. I think the team and her troops are really rallying around her to find ways to get to be more responsive.
TC, let me ask you one other thing on that topic real quick. Police Chief Renee Hall was in the news herself recently, made some news in D Magazine. She was your first big hire. How would you rate her job performance so far?
I think she's doing an outstanding job, particularly for the things that I hired her to do. Can't speak to people's perception of how they feel about some of the news that has been coming out related to her and or her responses to them. I'll let her speak to those things, but quite honestly, I'm satisfied. She's got my support, and I'm looking forward to her having a long career in the city.
Just a real quick follow on the police numbers. For example, you mentioned recruitment. I think cities across the state, across the country are having difficulty recruiting. So number one, what are you doing to attract more people to the job? And then number two, I've seen some FBI numbers that indicate the ratio of officers to citizens in many cities in Texas is below the national average. How are we doing here?
We're definitely tracking and trending consistent with a lot of other police forces in the country as well as the state.
On the ratio, you mean?
On the ratio,
yeah.
We are also hiring from the same pool. So we all have the same challenges. I had them when I was in Tacoma. We had them when we were in San Antonio. So nothing's changed. I think the tenor and tone of how policing throughout the country is as it relates to the engagement levels and the things going on more nationally may be affecting the attractiveness of the job, but we're doing things differently. These days we're actually in some cases going out of state and going off site, actually taking our whole recruitment team and doing testing in other locations on the spot to find ways to minimize the delays while we have the interest as it relates to working for the city of Dallas. We're also looking at and exploring different opportunities to provide some types of incentives as it relates to officers joining our force. We're looking at all of our various processes.
Maybe a little higher pay or something like that.
We're talking about pay, obviously. We're talking about things specific to how they go through the pay scales and just really looking at ways that we can keep people on our force and make them interested in policing in the city of Dallas.
Voters, let's switch off police, because we've talked a lot about police here too. I want to talk to you about another complaint that you guys get probably at City Hall all the time: bad streets. That's the one thing as a resident of Dallas I can't stand. But voters passed the bond package. You guys are getting to work on improving streets. Historically, though, the city has not enforced utilities and contractors when they come in and tear up the streets after they do a project. So what's being done in that department to make sure Atmos, to make sure a new developer fixes the street the way it was so we don't end up in the same problem that we're in right now?
And so that would be our street restoration program. And we have one. We are actually in the middle of looking at that to figure out how we can enhance that. Matter of fact, probably in a week or so, I plan to spend some time with my team talking about how we go about compliance and accountability in regards to that. And so one of the things we've got to do is put our contractors on notice. As I ride around the city, quite honestly, I see things when it comes to traffic interference, whether it's cones and other types of things, and or the things they put in place when they're doing construction.
Is the city going to do that? Put these contractors, put these utilities on notice to fix the streets, leave them the way you found them?
Definitely, definitely. One, it should be happening now, but when it does not happen and we see it out in the street, there needs to be some consequence for them not doing the things that they need to do.
I want to ask about something that we're watching in Fort Worth. We're watching Dallas, and that is this bike sharing thing you've got going. We can't understand, many of us, why you don't have dockable bikes so that they wouldn't end up in the streets and the medians and people's yards. Have you considered going to a dockable bike program like we have in Fort Worth, like the B-Cycle program, as opposed to having this sort of free-ranging system? And if not, why?
I think the history of this city, I think we've looked at bikes in docks. I think at the time we looked at it, and even during this whole transition to this new approach of dockless bikes, we've talked about it. I think the price range and tag for the city would probably be from $3 to $5 million of an investment to have that work.
That's what you have to spend more.
That's what we would have to spend to assist and provide that type of guidance.
But how much does it cost to clean, you know, to require that they be picked up and put away, maybe to avoid accidents?
Right now, there is no expense to the city. Under the new ordinance that was just adopted to permit the dockless bikes, that was just last week. Quite a big discussion based on some of that community concern. There will be penalties, there will be a process for notification, and some assurances from the companies that they'll get out there and pick up their bikes. There will be things put into their applications that advise citizens who use the bikes of the proper way to park them, where to not park them. We're creating some zones for them to be in. We're hopeful it's getting better. Right now, we know it's gotten better from when they first were introduced, but it's something we'll continue to look at. There are systems out there that may not require us to pay dollars to have them docked, and we're exploring all, and it's an open and free market at this point.
TC, final moments here too. Last 10 seconds. What's on your to-do list you haven't gotten to yet for 2018?
Well, one, we've got a project called Dallas Goals for Dallas 2030 that will be a community-wide vision, tenure strategic plan that we'll be working on for the next 12 months. We just completed our housing program or housing policy. We'll be moving into an economic development strategy and creating a mobility master plan to help guide the construction and transportation projects in our city.
T.C. Broadnax, Dallas City Manager, thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy being here.